Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Real Fucking Talk. I'm your host, Chris Shang, and today we have Silvia Poloto, who is an artist up in the Bay Area. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for having me.
Of course.
Yes.
So your art, you're Brazilian born. You're a visual artist. You also have a background as an electrical engineer, but you're fairly renowned nationally as well as like internationally, but specifically also in the Bay Area as an artist. And I'm curious as to you telling us a little bit about your story of like how you became an artist, what was the calling for you, where did you start seeing that as like becoming something that you're willing to dedicate the majority of your time to? When did that start happening?
Yes. So I moved to San Francisco in the early 90s, and it was my late husband's idea. He was from Ireland, but we got married in Brazil, and I was an electrical engineer at the time, and I had just finished my MBA. And so it was a good idea, I thought, like to come for a year. It was something unrelated to my work. It was something for his work. But I thought it could be interesting for me to spend a year learning English well and then go back. I had plans of what I wanted to do. I quit my job, but I wanted to start my own thing, and I can tell you more about that. But so we came, and immediately, as soon as we arrived, I was learning how to speak English better. I was taking an English as a second language class, and I just started having doubts about everything I had done so far with my life. I'm like, wait a minute, why did I go to engineering school? And who am I? And at that point, I didn't know who I was, but I knew I was not an engineer. It kind of like became clear to me that all the decisions I had done up to that point was to please others or to prove to myself that I could do something that was more like expected for a man to do. Like I wanted to prove that I was as smart as my older brother, for example, because my family always, praised his brains. And I was just as smart, and why don't they praise me? So I kind of like went, he is an electrical engineer, but that's really who he is. So he went to the best university in Brazil, and I felt like I needed to prove to myself or everybody around my family that I can do this too. And I just did that. I grow up, I didn't grow up in a household that was like, it could recognize that I was a creative person. I was always drawing, but that was really put down. Like that's silly, my brother would say, and that's what little girls do. And so there was no artistic exposure or anything. So for me, that was no existence, and it's so sad because here I don't know exactly how it works. It might not be as bad, but the university I went to, it's 5 years, and there's absolutely no liberal arts. It's all uh, math. Like from the two first years is the basic uh, for all the engineerings, it's all the same. And then on the third year, you choose where you're going to focus. So it's like I never got like to be in contact with anything creative. So when I graduated and I got a job, I was not in a technical but I was in marketing, and then I decided, because I was looking for something more fulfilling. So I went to get my master's degree in business administration. So it was not in engineering. And when I was doing this, I came across a class in advertising. And I thought, like, I fell in love. And now I know that I didn't fall. I thought at the time that I fell in love with the advertising, but the truth is, it was my first contact with something creative. And but I didn't realize that until much later. But like that really gave me like hope that, oh my God, life must be better than just having a boring job and you know, during the week, and then and trying to do something you like during the weekend. And, you know, life has to be more than that. So it was at that point, like when I finished my master's degree, my idea was to open my own advertising agency when I went back after spending a year here. But then I was even doubting that too. And throughout like this turmoil I was going through, I started out of the blue, I started cutting up pieces of magazines and putting them together, collaging them. And they were quite nice. And like I had no idea what I was doing. Like, you know, I just like felt this inner desire to make something. And then this is very strange now. I it's not like I went to a museum or a gallery and I saw a welded steel sculpture and I'm like, oh my God, I must do something like this. It was nothing like that. I don't know where that desire came from. I felt like I wanted to work with metal. It was not clear what I wanted to do, but I got that sense I wanted to work with metal. And so I took a metal arts class at City College, at San Francisco City College. And then I realized it was making jewelry and stuff. And that's not exactly what I wanted to do, but I started making little sculptures. And the instructor, he was very important for me because I think he saw something in me and he was really curious to know like what I was thinking or my ideas. And I brought those little collages I was making at home, like with little bits of pieces of colors of magazines. And when he looked at it, he thought I had an art degree. And I'm
Mm,
like, what? Like, I was like so stunned. I'm like, really? Is this really good? So he got up and he went to talk to another instructor that taught like monoprint. And the semester was already a third in, like, so it was not totally beginning, but the instructor, he brought him in to meet me at the classroom. And he said, this instructor, after he saw, he's like, you can start my class now if you want. I'm like, wait a minute, what? Like, really? Like, I was so um excited. And I'm like, oh, maybe there is something here. So anyway, so I started getting to, you know, like take a few classes. And then the next semester I took a welding class and I started making welded steel sculpture. And I remember the first sculpture I made, like I repeat this because it's super interesting. When like I finished, my work is very intuitive. Like I don't have any planning. I don't make a drawing or anything because I feel if I make a plan or a maquette or a drawing, it's done.
mm,
For me, I mean, like there are artists that's the way they work. For me, I wouldn't do it again. You know, it's already done either in a drawing format or in a maquette. So it's very intuitive. I just do it like I don't know what I'm doing. And that's for me, not knowing what I'm doing. There is a lot of joy there because it's like as if I'm open to all possibilities. But anyway, going back to like when I finished this first sculpture of mine, it was like a spiritual experience because I feel like I had not made this sculpture. The sculpture had been made through me. And and then I knew, I'm like, I should be doing this. I have no idea how I'm going to go about, but I have to keep doing this because the way I felt,
mm,
it's like I felt alive as never before. And and then eventually I realized that welded steel sculpture, I didn't invent welded steel sculpture. and and like I kept taking classes and eventually I got a scholarship, a merit scholarship to go to the Art Institute. And I started, but then I didn't know at this point how much time I had because like I would have to get a job if I, you know, wanted to keep doing I could do this on the side, but it's like I had taken some time for me to just explore this. And I didn't want to be taking classes. I knew what I wanted to do, like to just dive in whatever that was. So I ended up not moving forward with the school. So I'm basically self-taught,
Mm,
and I have taught myself a lot of technique, like things that I don't know where they come from. But so I started as a sculptor, then I learned photography to be able to photograph my sculptures, and then I fell in love with photography. Then eventually I started painting. Throughout painting, I paint, like I used acrylics, I have used oils, I use ink, but my work is constantly evolving. Artists work in different ways, and a lot of artists, they find something and they keep exploring that, and that's what their work is. So, but I work in series, so I explore during the time that that series is going on, and then when it's over, and that varies. Some series are very short, like I have 10 pieces or 12 pieces, and some might have 100 pieces. It depends. Some are shorter than others, but I try to change everything. Every time I start a new series, I change materials, I change concept, um, technique, everything. And I taught myself a lot of things. I work with fiberglass, with resin, um, all kinds of like different things, and that's it. It really, it keeps fresh for me. It's not, it's a good thing for me, but it's not good, nor it's not good or bad. It's just the way I work. And so I was lucky in the very beginning because I was so serious about it and so passionate and going for it, that I started putting my work out there throughout. Like I started doing open studio and participating in some juried exhibitions. This with my, I was still doing sculpture. And then eventually a gallery found my work in San Francisco and they started representing me. And then it was kind of like a snowball. Then I started getting requests from other galleries in other states, or, you know, and I didn't, well, by this time, the time had already come up to go back to Brazil. But like I decided that I didn't want to go back. So we ended up staying because I mean, my husband saw that I was really totally like how committed I was. I'm like, he's not going to fight with that. And I felt like going back. Of course, I could have gone back and started making art in Brazil, but it really felt that in San Francisco, I could be me, far away from family expectations or everything, that I could start fresh, like, and figure it out that would be much easier being far away from everything familiar.
interesting.
And here I am. So, yeah, so eventually, like, what else can I say? Yeah, so I have been making my living from my art. That's hard, like, but I have been doing this for over 20 years. And I always trust that, you know, if I keep being true to myself, like things will happen. It's not for the faint of heart, you know, like to go for some, because I mean, art, it's hard,
Yeah.
but I couldn't have done it otherwise. Things have changed a lot in a few past years. It became, artists are much more like, see, like, for example, something that I'm still struggling with, but I have no choice but dive in, for example, is Instagram. It's good because anyone can be seeing the work, but it's really hard. I don't know if every artist has a hard time with this. I rather be doing my work in the studio than to be sharing, like share everything. Like I'm not into it. I like to share when I want to share, but then if you really want to grow and be seen like you really, it's like, but it's the marketing today. And like I knew this, but now even more so, it's the marketing is even takes like a bigger
Mhm.
part of, like, the work that I always like put a lot of work into the business, but it seems like it's became more now with all this Instagram and sharing and TikTok or whatever. I would much rather be doing my work in the studio than and when it's like when I'm in the studio also, um I find that I really like to work on my own and be left alone, and it's sacred for me to be just with my work in silence. And I don't want to be, let me share this, I don't want to be doing that, you know what I mean? But that's just me. I'm sure there's some artists that lucky them, like that they enjoy all the sharing thing. But yeah, I'm going to get good at it. My plan is um to break, like, this wall, and then start really enjoying all this extreme sharing.
Mhm.
I didn't get to that yet, but
Yeah.
I plan on it.
Yeah,
Hmm.
thanks for sharing. I think you mentioned a lot of interesting points, and my brain was kind of turning in a few different directions. I think like it's interesting, number one, that you're saying like you ended up doing electrical engineering because you wanted to kind of prove a point. To perhaps maybe it started off with your family it being an influence, and then it became internalized to a certain degree of like wanting to prove to them, and or your brother or to yourself that you could just do as well as anybody else can. Uh, but then you're sacrificing your own personal happiness to do that versus like, and that I feel like is it's an interesting caveat because then it's like you're doing something like out of like pride or ego that was like I feel like I
Yeah.
have to prove myself, but that didn't necessarily bring you the happiness that being an artist ultimately would
Yeah,
lead
it
to.
never does, right? Like if you just do something for the wrong reasons, other expectations, or
Yeah, which I think when you're bringing that up was interesting because then it's like now you're in this conundrum of like making it's I mean I feel like every artist kind of has to go through this to a certain degree, which is like what is the compromise for the art that you're creating and then sustaining your livelihood, right? Or like sustaining like and what does that actually mean? Because everybody has a different definition of what livelihood or lifestyle means, right? So it's like, is it just the basic necessities, like just so I can feed myself, or is it like something else, right? And based off of those things, it's like you talk about the ability to market yourself, and some are really great at it, and and maybe that compromises part of the art, or like, but how much it's interesting because it's like how much then does the audience actually notice from it,
yes.
because at the end of the day, I think with art, um, especially, it's like you can definitely have people who create art for the idea of creating art's sake, but then if there isn't necessarily an audience or a market for it, are
Mm-hmm.
you still like making the impact of what an art like a commercially successful artist
No,
would?
no, totally, totally. Yes, like for example, I have been lucky that my work, the majority of it is like it connects with people enough that people want to buy. But I have had bodies of work that you know, for example, just an example, when I started painting, the work I was doing, it was very successful commercially. And so it would have been very easy for me to just refine that and just keep doing that type of work, but I can't do that. It would kill my soul. It would be like I would rather go and get a job,
Yeah,
maybe like not something else, maybe not that extreme, but it wouldn't be like this joy. So that's one of the reasons why my art changes so much. It's because like I do it to please me, number one, and then if I'm lucky, it's going to connect
yeah,
with others and I will be able to sell. Now there are lots of amazing artists that they do very difficult work that's not commercially successful, but at the end of the day, if you have, like somehow I feel like there is way to become a success if you have someone that knows what they're doing, like running your
yeah.
art career.
Yeah, I feel like with art, right? It's all about authenticity, and I feel like and authenticity, I feel like is what people connect to. So I think it's like when you're describing this conundrum for yourself, or like it's almost like a catch-22. Is like when you found enough success that it ultimately was like to continue to do it and just continue to reap on the success would almost feel disingenuous to what you were
Yeah,
doing.
for me, I mean,
Get it.
mm,
Right. Yeah, I get
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But then it would also probably translate to, I would think at some point in time, it would probably translate to um probably less commercial success over a period of time because it would start appearing disingenuous and you wouldn't be able to ride the momentum of your original works that maybe drew that attention in the first place, right? So
Yes,
there's
yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
I feel like for example, I start a series and it's really, I'm having so much joy. And if I if I do it long enough, as I said, some end before others, but when it starts to become like formulaic, that it's like as if I know what I'm doing, like to make the piece successful, it becomes stale for me, and then I'm like, it's not worth doing it. Maybe I could keep selling it, but it's no, it
almost like,
doesn't
I
work.
mean, I would imagine that's like a musical artist doing a Christmas album. Right. Right. It's like at that point they know it's not for it's probably just for a financial reward and it's
I
not.
know, and that's another thing. There's absolutely nothing wrong
Sure.
with having a job that's completely unrelated to art, so you can pay your bills, so you don't have your art compromised,
Yeah.
and it's fine.
Yeah.
Um, like I think I was lucky that I was able to just keep doing my thing. Maybe one series was not as successful, but another series was. um I
Yeah.
feel like I have been lucky, but like I used to years ago. Years ago, I would give a different advice. If someone asked for advice, I would say, no, just do what you're doing and keep doing your art, and eventually it's going to happen. And like I don't do that anymore. I'm like, if you must have a day job to pay your bills, so it takes the pressure off, because it can easily be compromised.
Yeah. You know who says that too?
Who?
You know who Rick Rubin is?
Yes, yes, yes.
I saw he quoted that. He said a quote very similar to that, which is like he gives the same advice, which is like do what you have to do to live so your art isn't compromised. Because
Yeah,
yeah,
it's he did this book that I bought and I didn't read it. It's sitting somewhere, and I'm dying to read because like I flipped through it quickly and then I don't know where it is, but I have to find it because I'm sure it's full of good stuff in that book. Yes. Yeah, but I didn't know he had said that.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's true. I think it's so interesting. It's like I think like the artist journey, even like I think when it comes down to like I had a very I would say like I had a similar experience in the sense that I came from a family that didn't foster creativity. Like I would paint a lot. I actually painted really well.
Ah,
draw really well, and I was really great at writing poetry. I remember back even when I was like 11, 10, like 10, 11, 12 years old, I was really good at writing. I remember how going into college, doing the basic, creative writing classes you have to do in college. And one of the instructors was like, the last time I saw something that was as good as this writing was a former student of hers, which was David Duchovny, who was like the guy who ended up on X-Files, right? Like, and I was like, I didn't even know what to take or make out of that, because the idea
Ah,
of of being good at something creative, like I I never connected that that's a possible career path,
mm,
because
yeah.
it was fostered for me. I ultimately found my version of creativity mixed with security in entrepreneurship, which I think there's a lot of like crossover skill sets from a soft skills perspective around, like, coming up with ideas and experimenting with ideas and seeing how audience reacts to different ideas. I think it's more sophisticated around like the data that you're able to aggregate. It's more organized, but I think it's also similar in the sense that you are always trying to find, at least the companies that do it really well, like you're always trying to figure out the most authentic and simplest way to describe what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Mm,
Um, and I think from an artist perspective, it's like you're doing that in a way that is, pulling away all the layers of, you know, of of almost like being too smart for your own sake. Like it's getting rid of like the ego and getting rid of like a lot of these different things. And I feel like there are those artists, and I remember being like, I did spend some time doing like TV and film production, and part of that was like you can see performers, like actors specifically, that get in their own way. I was able to start reading it, which is like they are so the idea of being stuck in on the lines in the script versus like adopting it and then putting it into your own context of your own life experience to then be able to regurgitate the specific emotion that the writer was looking for. That's your job. Your job is to be a physical conduit of a specific emotion and carry that out, not words on a page. The words on a page a fifth grader could read a words on the page. I'm curious for you, it's like, it almost feels like it's like when you get too fluent with your own self-expression, like it's like those words, it's like almost like those words on the page versus like becoming a conduit for whatever the emotion
mhm,
is that you're trying
mhm.
to express.
Yeah,
Does that make any sense to
yeah,
you?
yeah. No, it
Um,
makes sense.
where it's almost like if you get too familiar, it's almost like that emotion no longer becomes authentic or real to you. And it's hard for you to it's almost like you're pulling on that for a specific medium, and then it exhausts itself to at a certain point, and it's hard to keep tapping into that same emotion. It's kind of the energy of that emotion is kind of depleted, and you have to move into something else that tugs on a different emotion.
Yes, yes.
Is that is that kind of
Yeah,
how you feel, or I don't know?
totally.
Yeah,
I always say that like to make my work, I follow my feelings.
yeah,
I always follow my feelings,
yeah.
It's for me, it's all about emotion.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm more curious. I get it from my context of like having seen it in different ways. And then I think also like as somebody who's also like experimented with performance art and doing stuff like that, like there are moments when you actually connect with something that you thought you're not physically you're no longer thinking about it. It's almost like the easiest way I describe it, like somebody who plays basketball is like it's being in a flow state, right? It's like when you play basketball, like it's all muscle memory at a certain point when you're able to repetitively make the basket. It's nothing to do with you thinking about anything. It's like your body is taking over and you're in this flow state. Is that
Mhm.
kind of similar to like how you feel when you're creating?
Yeah, when I'm creating, the best place to be is not to think.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize like I remember when I took a photography class at City
Yeah.
College because I wanted to learn how to photograph my sculptures, and then it turned into like something that I really love, and I started doing very cool things like so long ago, but they and recently, like in a body of work that I did last year and the year before, I brought photography back, mixture with my paintings, but that's another story. But anyway, so when I was taking this photography, like they were very surreal, and the photos I was, and people wanted to know, and even the structure, like they asked me, and they made, and I was so like, I had just started being an art, like creating, right? So they asked me this question. So what are you thinking about when you make this? And I genuinely thought about it. And then I said, I don't think at all. And that was like, and they were like, I remember them so being kind of horrified with my answer, but that was the truth. I'm like, if I am ever going to make something good, be sure that I was not thinking of anything. It's like this emptiness for whatever it is to come through. Because I mean, like your mind can get on the way.
Yeah.
And for me, I can never generalize. I mean, this is just how it works for me.
Yeah.
You know, other artists must maybe work different ways. Some might be like, but always it's almost like I'm in a zone. Like I don't even know how am I doing the like I'm not thinking at all. And that's always the best work.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's got to be like super liberating and very free, right? And I mean, I feel like so many people, I wish more people are able to feel what that is like in terms of whatever that mode of expression is, right? Like, and it doesn't have to be in art, it could be in science, it could be in, something else. But I feel like there's a lot of the population that plays it safe. Like you're talking about the family upbringing, and there's a lot of people that didn't make your decision, right? Which is like they ended up still doing electrical engineering and they're still
Yes, yes.
right? And they never followed whatever that is that you instinctually followed. Um, and I don't know, maybe people don't need that level of fulfillment, but I feel like when you do actually feel it, it's so rewarding to actually to go through. And you mentioned, being distanced from your family, so that influence you're probably different now. Like you probably look at it different now, have a different relationship with your family. But back then, it felt like you were like, it's almost like the way that you describe is like you were not necessarily sure that you were strong enough to not fall under that influence were you to go back to then follow this path.
I know it was too much noise.
Yeah,
And I feel like, can you like I think everybody really needs some kind of, it doesn't have to be, someone doesn't have to be an artist, obviously, but everybody has something that could make them feel completely alive.
yeah.
And I feel like to just do something just to, because of other people's expectations, to fulfill other people's expectations, can you imagine something more soul crushing than that?
Me
That's,
personally, no. I mean, like yeah, that would be soul crushing for me. Like, I mean, I get that part of it, which is why I'm an entrepreneur and I do what I do. But I think but there are so many people that do. I mean, I know, like yeah, I just met with a friend of mine up in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago who's works for Apple and great job, great pay, takes care of his family, but it's soul crushing for him. I see it in him and he tells me it's soul crushing and but it's, there's a sacrifice that that he is making, that other people make in that level of comfortability for their ultimate like happiness, I suppose, right?
I know, but like that's whatever, if you like have a job and it's safe because it brings you financial security, right? Yeah, I understand, but you can never find real fulfillment for something outside of yourself, right? It's like, so you have all this money and then you keep buying things and
Oh
it's
yeah.
all these things, and
Another,
even like trips or cars or new house, and it's always going to be a hole
oh
inside
yeah.
of you that's impossible to be filled. And so,
Yeah.
right?
And I think that's the thing, right? It's like I mean, I know we're going off on a tangent, but this is the point of it, which is like I think that a lot of people will take that security thinking that it will, the financial security that escalates what material goods they get to then think it's going to yield some level of satisfaction or happiness, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like the more that they can accumulate from an experience externally or like a material good that's also external, that's going to bring something, right? Which to me, in my experience, as somebody who's dabbled in being financially completely irresponsible and spending all that kind of money on stupid things, to then like being broke before and then to make conscious decisions to really pull back and minimize life, I find that my most happiness is my current state now, which has been pull back. Like I recently got rid of like 80% of my belongings, moved out of Los Angeles uh and I realized in that journey just like I do not need a lot of this stuff. And do the things that make me happy, right? And the things that make me happy and self-fulfilled has nothing to do with where I'm physically at, what I'm able to accumulate, um,
Totally.
or even the validation that other people do or give you, which is like that pat on the back for doing a good job. Like that doesn't even do anything, like which I think a lot of people who work in companies are looking for too, is like
And artists too, like the
that's
artists, um, and it's super hard, but at least I'm aware of that
yeah,
that ultimately doesn't matter. But of course, I'm not saying that I don't care,
yeah,
but I know like that it doesn't matter in the
yeah.
end.
I think that's the catch 22 is like I think for you to create authentic, like to create great art has to, it's like this seek for truth and authenticity. And of course it matters if people are going to how they respond to it. Do they respond to the emotion that you're going through or that you were trying to elicit because of your journey in creating it. But I think it also comes down to it's like how raw were you when you're creating it with that specific emotion in mind. And in in the creative process, you do have to kind of delineate yourself from the judgment that might come later in the future, where whatever it might be. And that's part of maybe the overarching process, but the moment of creating I feel like has to be authentic in that
Yes,
experience. Um, on the,
agree.
sorry, on the last note, we're way over time, but I just wanted to ask you one more question around that, which is, um, how do you personally get to the authentic place? And maybe it is like switching the mediums up, like you're talking about. But then if that's the case, like, how do you find the emotion or the feeling that like how do you lock into what that feeling needs to be? And then when do you know when, or like what does it feel like? Maybe it's better to explain it. Like what does it feel like when you know that you perhaps exhausted that medium and that you need to move to another one?
Yeah, because that feeling, that exhilaration, it's gone, right? So it's like I have to look for some other source of materials or whatever. But but how to make that come? Like it's by doing it. There is something like inspiration. It's not something, oh, I'm inspired now, so I must go to the studio. No, it's never like that. You are in the studio and you are having a hard day, but you just keep trying, and then it comes. It's almost like inspiration actually is discipline.
Yeah, I agree, 1,000%. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
Going and
this
putting yourself
magic.
into the studio day in and day out until
Ah,
something.
yeah, it will happen.
Yeah,
It will happen.
I love that. I mean, I feel like like Billie Eilish and her brother talk about that all the time, which is the discipline of just being in their studio. And like they wrote I think like the James Bond theme song in 5 minutes. But it was like the 5 weeks prior to that of like just
Exactly.
going in and creating things that never worked. And then the
Exactly.
5 minutes that you need.
And it's
Someone
like,
talks about that too, which is funny. It's like
but this is so true. But like, I must say something about that. So there is nothing more annoying than when someone looks at a piece of
yeah,
artwork and ask, "How long did it take you to make that?"
yeah.
So first of all, I'm not kidding. The best works is the ones that come in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
But that doesn't mean it took 5 minutes. It took, you know what I always say, it took my whole life. It took me my whole life to get to the point to go to the studio and make this painting.
yeah,
I couldn't have done it a month ago. I couldn't have made it 2 months ago. I have to leave it up to this day, you
yeah,
know? And
yeah.
it's
It's
like
the
people have a hard time understanding
Yeah,
that.
it's that flow state of everything kind of connects together from life experience, time, where your mind is to your body, and it all connects. But you have to, it's like going through that muscle memory exercise.
Yes,
It's basketball. It's like you're not going to make a basket unless you've shot it from that same position 1,000 times before. Do you know what I mean? And
exactly.
then for your body to remember it, to connect it. So when you're in the game, it comes. But it's that level of discipline that you have to do. And I think that's where most people don't connect the dots. It's like, how did Michael Jordan become Michael Jordan? It's not like he just decided to pick up a basketball. Like, how long did it take you to play basketball? Like,
I
it's not
know.
that binary of an answer. It's like, it's all those other things that all the athletes always the great athletes will tell you. It's like the discipline of what they had to do, but that only comes after they've done it because their body remembers the muscle memory. And I think for the artists, it's the same thing. It's like you have
Mhm.
to go in, try all the different things that don't work for you to then get to that thing that ultimately, all right, here it is. And that's like by Nate, to me, I mirror it. It's like then that's when like that basketball player goes off for 30 straight baskets. It's like it all happens within like a 5-10 minute window, but it's all of the other things that they did for five,
Yes,
10 years prior to get to that ability, right?
exactly.
Interesting. Well, I want to say thank you so much for taking your time, sharing your journey. This is a very interesting conversation.
I
Of
thank you so much for having me. Thank
course,
you.
of
Yeah,
course,
it
yeah.
was great talking to you, Chris.
Same. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yes. All right.